Hello, Amber.
Hello, we are on air. I believe we have a couple people joining us right now.
Amazing. Okay. Well, welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Let me make
We
sure.
will be starting in about 8 minutes. So,
Make sure all my settings are together. Audio's okay on your end, Amber?
yeah, I hear you. Great.
Perfect.
I don't see you though.
That is a problem.
There you are.
Perfect. The image of me.
Yes. It's filling up in there.
It's hundreds, register. That's a fantastic outcome.
Yeah, we had 382 registered this evening. So,
Not a small group of individuals, that's for sure.
welcome everyone who's just popping in here. We will be starting in about 5 minutes. Good evening, everybody who's just joining us. I'm going to be recording your questions and we're going to get to all of them at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, just add them in the little chat here on the side. We will be keeping everyone on mute for the presentation. So if you have any questions, please just type it into the chat here on the side, and we will get to that at the end of the presentation. And we will be starting in about 2 minutes. Okay, we have a couple more people trickling in here. Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting right away here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's wellness talk. My name is Amber, and I'm the event coordinator here at Nature's Fair. Tonight, we are thrilled to present a session titled The Ultimate Sleep Makeover, and we are honored to welcome Dr. Owen Wiseman, a celebrated naturopathic doctor and medical advisor to A. Vogel. Dr. Wiseman is dedicated to moving beyond quick fixes to deliver life-altering health transformations. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited to learn all about this topic that has affected all of us at some point in our lives. So we will get right into it. I'll let you know this session will be recorded. So if anyone would like to replay it tomorrow or share it with a friend, I will be sending the link out to you tomorrow by email. And all of your questions, please put them on the side in the chat here. I'll be monitoring this throughout the presentation. And at the end, we will go over anything that wasn't answered by Dr. Owen. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Owen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me out here and having me. I am joining you from Ontario, so it's just a little bit later out here than it probably is over there. And it's a pretty eventful day, obviously, across North America. I think many of us are suffering from sleep. If you think of talking about something else, no worries. But many of us are struggling with sleep right now. And that's a big piece of the puzzle that we're trying to talk about. So I've seen a couple of questions in the chat about how do I actually get more deep sleep? How do I make sure I'm not waking up during the night? How do I try and get those 8 hours and actually wake up feeling rested? So that is a big thing that we really want to have a conversation about. So the slide deck that we've put together is really just to give you a couple of tips. Oftentimes we kind of think that these webinars being presented by a company are going to be product only. They're not. So I really wanted to make a really good replay value video that you could come back and you could rewatch. And just like Amber said, you could share it with your friends and your family and just give them a little bit of feedback and some tips to help them get a better night's sleep as well. So what we want to do is we're actually going to start the presentation here too. Let's see. There we go. So I'm quite excited to be with everybody and just getting a thumbs up. Amber, can we see the slides? Excellent. Perfect. Okay. Well, let's not waste anybody's time and we can get through this. So as always, I want to say a huge thank you. So one of the big honors and privileges for my position doing education across Canada is you get to meet these stores and these people that are so well educated and they truly, really want to help you. So I would always advise you that if you're struggling or if you read something online or on the internet, maybe someone shares something on Facebook and you think, oh, I should probably take that. Go first and have a conversation with the team and the staff at Nature's Fair Markets. They're incredibly well educated. They attend a lot of trainings, so they can have a conversation about you and see if that is the right fit for what you're looking for that evening as well. So I wanted to say a welcome on behalf of Avogel as well. So if you've never heard of the company, Avogel is actually joining, it's a company based out of Switzerland. So when we think of Switzerland, oftentimes we kind of think of that famous flag of ours with the red and white on it, the first aid symbol. But the company itself was actually founded by Dr. Alfred Vogel over 100 years ago. It's actually our 102nd anniversary next year. And he was a really avid lover of nature. So I want to kind of take you back to the early 1900s, to a time when a young boy named Alfred Vogel, barely able to read or write at that time, he wandered the Swiss countryside with his father. And I always like to picture him really wide-eyed, and he's collecting these herbs and he's learning their medicinal value, and he's learning their uses from his own grandmother. That knowledge is being passed on through the generations. And so can you imagine being introduced to plants, not just for their beauty, because they are certainly beautiful, but really as powerful healers? So I want to invite you just to think just for a second how often we overlook the very nature around us. And I mean, I've been lucky enough to visit Kelowna, I have family in Vernon and Lake Country, and the nature out there is absolutely incredible. And it's things that we often pass by without a second thought. But when you get someone from Ontario where we don't have that kind of stuff out here and we get to see all that nature, it's just absolutely incredible. And it really reminds us of the power of the nature that's around us. And he was always avid on using fresh plants in his own medicinal ingredients, because he really understood that fresh is best and fresh is more potent, which means you're going to get a better effect. You're going to sleep deeper than if you're using a dried plant as well. And the one thing with Avogel that I'll often also leave on is just that the plants are scientifically researched. There's a lot of products that come into the market really, really fast. They burn bright and then they kind of disappear. And one of the big things is the company's been around for 100 years. We've had a lot of time to get things right. And Alfred understood that I need to go learn from experts, right? He was from a time when we didn't have the entire internet in the palm of our hand. So he really had to go and learn from others and learn from other experts to gain that knowledge. And so I had the chance and the opportunity to visit Switzerland and visit the team and the operation over there. And they all joked because a couple of the members knew Alfred Vogel, and they said he would just wake up one day and he'd get this idea that he read about devil's claw. So he would just disappear and he'd take a trip down to South Africa to meet people who used and grew and nurtured devil's claw in their own fields and gardens. So he was definitely a traveler and a very interesting guy. I think there's times when I often feel close to him in terms of emulating his life and his love for nature as well. Not so much the waking up in the middle of the night and just leaving my family part. But what really sets it apart? So this is actually a photo taken of our analytics lab with what we call a kind of point in the background. It's a gathering point. It fits about 30 people inside that building. So it's probably much larger than the building might communicate. So I talked a little bit about the fresh plants. The biggest thing too is you want to really focus on quality assurance. So safety is really important. Because when we think about Canadians, especially aging Canadians, which is many of us, we want to think about, I might be on a sleep medication. I might be taking an antihypertensive medication. I might be taking an antidepressant. So the great thing about having pharmaceutical grade natural health products is that they have been standardized. They have been tested. They are very, very safe across a number of things, and we can know what they're going to interact with. So that's why making a really informed choice for the highest potency you can is so protective of your health overall. And we're always doing continuous monitoring. So it is, as I said, pharmaceutical grade. So what that means is it does set us up for having to do a lot more analytics than maybe the average natural health product has to do. I'm a big fan of pictures as well. So one thing I wanted to show just briefly is this is actually some photos from our operation as well. This is just, again, one of our analytics labs. So you see two of our scientists working on analyzing soil, analyzing alcohol content, analyzing the water extractions. That is actually the sore throat spray, if you're familiar with that, about to be bottled and tested. This is the young Norway spruce bud tips that are actually going into the Santa Sapina soothing cough syrup, which is really well indicated for a dry, irritated throat. And again, we're talking about sleep today, but if a cough is keeping you up, that might be one of the options that you want to think about as well. But what I'm really hoping to kind of have a conversation about today is the importance of sleep. I think inherently, we all know it's important. And there's probably a lot of family that's telling us, oh, you didn't sleep last night? You better sleep tonight. Get a good rest. And it's interesting, even in our vocabulary with each other, how's the weather? How was your weekend? How did you sleep? Those are often some of the questions that we ask. So it's even inherent in our conversations with one another. And I don't think I'm probably surprising any of you when I write these couple of points on the screen right now. We know that sleep is going to support brain function. We know that when we're tired, our brain is just a little bit slower. We're not fully cognitively there. We know physical health. If you've ever had a couple of sleepless nights, I saw a couple of people alluding to restless legs, a couple of people alluding to kind of the pain and the cramping that we can get. And I'll touch on that towards the end when we get to the Q&A. But we know it affects our physical health. And then emotional well-being. Anyone who's ever dealt with a toddler in their entire life knows that if that toddler misses nap time, that is a completely different child than the one who gets a good night's sleep. They become a little terror oftentimes. We still love them, but they are a very different child. We know that sleep is really essential for children's growth and development, but we often just talk about that for kids. We have to remember in the stages of deep sleep, that is where your body is releasing things like growth hormone and a number of different hormones from the pituitary gland, a really, really small gland in the brain that is responsible for so much around our body. So we really need to make sure that we're getting the sleep to regulate those hormonal releases that occur overnight. And the last thing I just really wanted to stress is chronic sleep deprivation. So if we are missing nights of sleep, one after the other, we know that can actually increase your risk of heart disease and stroke and even obesity. And we will get to this in just a second. So when we think about all of the importance of sleep, we have to remember there are so many factors that go into determining whether or not you actually get a good night's sleep. I just chose a few. So we know if we're stressed, we're not going to sleep. We're going to sit there before bed ruminating and thinking about all the things that we have to do tomorrow. Physical activity can be incredibly beneficial for sleep, but if we are doing a strenuous, really vigorous physical activity right before bed, the trouble there is that can actually wire us a little bit more and we're not going to be able to get to sleep as much. But then if we exercise in the morning, is that also good enough to help us get to sleep? The nighttime routine. Our brain loves routine. I always talk to patients that there is a scale in the brain. If your life is more predictable, there's less anxiety. And anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Chronic, yes. But those acute stressors, that's actually quite healing for the body overall. So the more predictable your nighttime routine can be, the less anxious the brain is, the less likely you are going to sit there ruminating day after day, night after night. We know that nicotine is a stimulant. It will keep you more awake. If you have a heavy meal before bed, your brain is going to direct a whole bunch of blood to your digestive organs. And that is not going to be so good for a good night's sleep either, because you're going to have bloating. You're going to feel a little gassy. Your stomach is going to be stretched and full. So you want to kind of space out your mealtime as best as you can from that night's sleep. And again, we'll go more in depth into this. Different health conditions, the bedroom environment, napping more than 30 minutes will actually limit your sleep at night, because you're fitting in these little micro sleeps throughout the day. So then your brain at night is going, well, I caught about an hour of sleep earlier, so I'm only going to sleep 6.5 hours as a result of that longer nap. So naps might feel really, really good once in a while. We definitely don't want to make them a big piece of our day-to-day routine if we can avoid it. And then, of course, caffeine. I have never understood how family members of mine can have a coffee right before bed and tell me that they're getting a good night's sleep. I'm definitely someone where past 11 a.m., 12 p.m., I'm definitely avoiding caffeine as much as I can, because I know it will affect my sleep quality and it will keep me up. So what I wanted to show is just going back to that heavy meal before bed. So if you have a heavy meal really, really close to bedtime, you actually on average lose about 26 minutes of your sleep time, your total sleep time. So if you're someone who typically sleeps 8 hours, if you have a heavy meal right before bed, you're going to sleep about 7.5 hours. And night after night, one night that might not mean so much, but night after night, you have to think, if I'm losing half an hour here, half an hour there, this is why you're going to miss about 3% of your REM sleep. And in the morning, you are going to feel 10% less energetic. So that is a big sacrifice, because now you have to think about the snowball effects. If you are sleeping or you're feeling 10% less energetic, 10% less rested, are you going to feel motivated to do that morning walk or that morning workout? Are you going to feel as productive at work? Are you going to feel like going to look after your grandkids because you've missed out on that 10% energy boost that you typically get because we had a really late meal? So depending on how the day is going, it might be unavoidable. It's just not something that we want to do every single night and include in our regular day-to-day routine. Now, caffeine, I talked about this already. Caffeine's peak effect, the absolute peak effect, it hits about 30 to 60 minutes after consumption overall. And it's spreading through the body, and then it crosses what we call the blood-brain barrier. This is a really powerful wall that exists to protect the brain, because obviously with the brain being the control center, we need to make sure it has extra defenses. It's like Parliament Hill or the White House. It's protecting itself from everything outside. And it's going to block what we call adenosine. And adenosine is basically a compound that builds up during the day to promote sleep. And it's going to help keep us a little bit more alert than drowsy. And caffeine's also going to disrupt melatonin rhythms. And that's going to delay how quickly you fall asleep. So with a half-life, that's basically what it means is how long until I've cleared 50% of that caffeine out of my body. So the half-life of caffeine is about 6 hours on average, but there's so many different factors that affect it. How healthy is our liver? Our liver is a huge part in metabolizing caffeine as well. So if you have a really, really healthy liver, it's going to metabolize a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficiently. But if our liver's more sluggish and it's feeling a little bit slow, it's not going to metabolize at that rate. So you might keep more of that caffeine in your body for a longer period of time. So my advice to everyone is usually just try and cut it off by 11 a.m. That tends to be a pretty good hour for most of us who are kind of going to bed around that 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. range. If you stay up a little later, then it's a bit different for you. Now, the circadian rhythm is something we often hear about, but I just wanted to spend 1 minute kind of going through it with you as well. So this is a typical rhythm of hormones and neurotransmitters and brain chemicals that occurs in the body. And it's really, really heavily influenced by light and darkness. And when you reach back for humans thousands of years ago, our bodies were completely regulated by the dance of the sun and the moon. And so we know that exposure to light is going to drive the release of hormones like melatonin and cortisol. So if there's low light, cortisol drops, melatonin increases. If there's high light, then the cortisol is going to increase and melatonin will drop. So as the day is fading into night, darkness is going to signal that melatonin production, which tends to peak around, where are we on this clock? It's kind of around 9 p.m. That melatonin secretion is really going to peak. So on this clock, it's about 21, which is 9 p.m. You can see that we're going through the night. We're going to start to fall into a deeper sleep. Our low body temperature occurs kind of around that 3 a.m., 4 a.m. timing. And then cortisol does start to naturally come up in the body around 6 a.m. and it tends to peak around 10 a.m. So this is why for most people that morning productivity boost is a real thing, but you can kind of see as the day weans forward, that's why we tend to lose some of that alertness around 2 p.m. And that's when we're looking for a nice place to lay our head and enjoy a cozy sleep or a nap. So this is a pretty typical pattern that we're seeing occur, right? And let's just talk about blue light for 1 second. It is really the invisible stressor that is hiding in plain sight, including in front of me, although I do have a nighttime filter on my computer right now. And every time we scroll, every time we binge watch, every time we type late into the night, we're flooding our system with blue light, which is going to trigger a cortisol surge, the stress hormone, the alert hormone. That stress hormone is going to keep us on high alert. And that's going to disrupt our body's natural system. We can see, right? We hear a lot about, oh, it's golden hour, that nice lighting before the sun sets. But then you can see as we're moving into high noon, the blue wavelength is incredibly strong. And so what we really need to think about is blocking the blue. We know that aging is going to accelerate with artificial light exposure. There's really good data that's showing us that your internal clock actually ticks faster and speeds up cellular aging. There's a big thing in the research right now looking at biological age versus chronological age. So if you're 58 chronologically, what is your biological age? Do you have a body that's more like someone who's almost 70? Or do you have a body that's more like someone who's just turned 50? And you take off some of those years. So what we really need to think about is how even blue light is going to attack our thyroid. We know that blue light exposure can actually penetrate through the skin, right? It's just a wavelength. It's just an energy wave. And that can potentially disrupt hormone production. The research is still pretty early there, but they are looking at how it's affecting hormone production. And I see it a lot in clinic. Folks with what we call subclinical hypothyroidism. They're not quite at full-blown hypothyroidism, but their hormones are starting to move there when I test their blood. And we know that melatonin is going to get blocked by blue light because of that alertness, right? That high wavelength energy, the blue light. So what's going to happen is that is going to interrupt melatonin. It's going to be poor sleep. It's going to be that you're not actually detoxing during the night. And there's a really cool system in our brain called the glymphatic system. And they're kind of referring to it as the cleanup crew that's going to come in through the night. And what we know is when you interrupt your sleep, you are not getting that cleanup. So if Tuesday in your neighborhood is garbage day, imagine if we missed a couple of Tuesdays. What would your streets look like? What would they smell like? More importantly, they might even attract a couple of company. It was actually out in Kelowna where I met my first bear. That's a story for a different time, but we definitely do not want to attract them back into our town. So that's a little bit about how it's affecting cellular aging. So you can hopefully see why sleep is so important right now. But one thing I want you to ask yourself is, have you ever wondered why you're more tempted by snacks when you're tired? Think about that. When you're sitting there tired, it's just a little easier to go, what's a little bag of chips before bed? That's going to be nothing. So we know that poor sleep messes with hormones that regulate hunger. We know that that's going to lead for cravings for higher calorie foods. And then it's going to impact how well your body actually utilizes something called insulin. And that is going to increase the risk of metabolic problems, which includes heart attack, stroke, holding fat around the abdomen in the belly region. So a full night's rest is going to help you make healthier food choices and keep your metabolism in check. Because if we're missing those Z's, we're going to increase the hunger hormone ghrelin. I always kind of remember this in school many, many years ago was growling ghrelin. That's the hunger hormone. That's the hormone that's going to make us go, yeah, that bowl of ice cream is looking pretty tempting. And it's actually going to shut down the appetite suppressing hormone called leptin. It's going to lock it away in a different room and go, I don't need to hear from you. I'm enjoying my ice cream right now. Nothing wrong with a little treat now and again, but just obviously know that missing those sleeps is going to make it harder to manage weight. And we know that if you're holding on to more weight as we age, it's going to put you at risk of a number of different issues. So this is actually something called insulin resistance. And when you actually sleep less than 6 hours, your risk of insulin resistance goes up quite significantly. But one thing I really want you to pay attention to is it's the same on the other side of the curve. So when you're sleeping more than 9 hours, you are actually much more at risk of insulin resistance. You're not getting your body moving enough. You're not getting that rhythm stabilized, that kind of 24-hour clock. So there is a bit of a sweet spot between 6 to 8 hours. I don't want you aiming for 6. I would far rather you aim for 8. But if you're getting into that 7 zone, it doesn't mean you are unhealthy. We just really need to make sure that we're focusing on those good, deep hours of sleep. To go a little bit more in depth on the metabolic conversation too, I really like this image. I think it's just such a great summary. We know that if you're getting less than 7 hours per night, multiple nights in a row, that is going to put lots of stress on your system. It's going to have a direct shock to your system. And it's going to increase what we call lipolysis as well. So we definitely want to avoid that because we want insulin to be sensitive. That's what our goal is. So we just looked at insulin resistance. That's not good. We do not want to be insulin resistant. We want to be insulin sensitive. It's like the way I explain to patients is you've got that really energetic friend, let's call him Steve, and he's waiting outside the door, but no one's there to actually open the door and let Steve in. So it's not going to be much of a party if Steve doesn't show up. So we really want to make sure that we can hear that knock at the door and let them in. Because with the cycles of sleep, they're about 90 minutes on average. So we need to make sure that we're really trying to get it. But what I want you to notice is how that REM stage grows longer and how that sleep cycle, we actually go less deep. So the first couple of hours of sleep are really, really crucial. So if we're going to bed and we're waking up an hour and a half later, that's not too good. If we can at least get you 3, 4, 5 hours through a direct sleep, no waking up, that's going to be really restorative. I'd love to get you a little bit further, but let's focus on getting you 5 good, deep quality hours of sleep first. 6 is even better. Because if we're losing out on it, then we are going to have troubles, as we just talked about, with metabolism, cellular aging, etc. So then also what we're looking at is there's 3 key states. So with wakefulness, I'm not going to go into that. When you're awake, you get to do things. When you're in deep sleep, your body is recharging. It's restoring energy. It's helping your muscles recover. And then in REM, that's actually helping with mood control. It's sorting through our emotions. It's consolidating memories as well into long-term storage. I actually recently just watched the new movie Inside Out 2, and they had a really, really cool conversation about memory consolidation and how it gets stored into short-term and we get rid of a couple of memories and how it gets into long-term as well. It's well worth a watch if you're interested. We've talked a little bit about cortisol. I kind of told you already how it's really, really high in the morning around 10 a.m. to really help us feel alert and ready to take on the day. And typically, chores were done at first light. again, before the invention of all the electric lighting, you had to go by the hours of the sun and the sun's light. So most of your chores, you were basically doing it while the sun was up. So it's very common to see cortisol dropping later in the day and feeling tired as the days get cooler and shorter. It's been a lot about sleep, though. Fun fact, humans are the only mammals that delay sleep willingly. We're the only ones who sit there and go, one more episode, and we deny that tiredness and that fatigue that our body's trying to signal to us. And then the interesting thing is the world record for the longest period without sleep is actually 19 days. That is a insanely long time. That's actually Robert McDonald who achieved this feat in 1986. And the Guinness Book of World Records actually removed it as a world record afterwards because they didn't want more people trying to deprive themselves, recognizing how damaging it is on the body overall. So earlier you heard me talk a little bit about pharmaceutical grade. So the one thing that if you're choosing products to help you sleep, you want to choose the highest quality ones. And Avocal, they're actually pharmaceutical grade. So doctors and pharmacists over in Switzerland can actually write prescriptions for 43 of our 72 products, which is really, really amazing. And I pray that we'll see that happen in Canada, but I think I'll be praying for quite some time. So the sleep options that we want to think about when we're choosing pharmaceutical grade are actually lemon balm and wild lettuce. Really, really well-studied herbs. And all the folks at Nature's Fair, like I said earlier, they are there to support you in this conversation. So wild lettuce was actually something that appeared in the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt years ago. And when we were trying to think of a product to introduce in Canada, this is what we were looking at. What herb is new? Because we have a lot of people on the call that might be going, I've tried everything. I've tried magnesium, I've tried valerian, I've tried this, I've tried that, and it doesn't work. So I'm really excited to say there's a new herb on the Canadian market, which is really exciting. And that is actually wild lettuce. So they would boil the lettuce because it was quite widely available for crop growth. And they would actually drink the water of that boiled lettuce to go to sleep. So we just thought, okay, we got to look into this more. And that's where we found, there's a lot of research to support its use in sleep. And it's non-addictive, non-habit forming, and safe for long-term use. So giving us one of those natural alternatives to things like trazodone or zopiclone, Dayvigo, which is the new kid on the block. And we have lemon balm. And lemon balm is traditionally used for anxiety. And you might be sitting there going, well, I'm not anxious, which is great. And I'm glad to hear that. But one of the big things that does keep us up before bed is that rumination that occurs in our mind, where our thoughts just keep running and running and running. So if we can actually calm the nerves and promote sleep and reduce stress levels, oxidative stress levels, we are going to sleep better. So those two herbs are actually combined in that brand new herb to the Canadian market, wild lettuce, and it comes in a sachet packet format. I myself am very tired of swallowing pills. I've got my little container of all my different pills over here, all my different supplements. And sometimes I get really tired of going and taking another one and drinking a water. So these are actually powdered sachet. Doesn't taste great, doesn't taste horrible. We don't sweeten stuff, so it's a very neutral, herby taste, a little bit berry almost. And what happens is when you rip open the sachet, I typically hold it in my mouth for about 30 seconds because it will really quickly absorb into my body and my system. And that's going to help lull me to sleep in about 5 to 15 minutes. So it's definitely something I'll be using tonight just to help me get a nice, deep, restorative sleep before starting tomorrow my day. And in there, what's really interesting is you also have L-tryptophan. And L-tryptophan is a compound. It's an amino acid. People often remember it, when I eat turkey's really high in L-tryptophan and I get sleepy. L-tryptophan makes you sleepy because it converts into melatonin. So instead of taking a product with melatonin in it, take the precursor. You have all the ingredients to make it. That's the beauty of it. So if you want to make a cake, here's all the ingredients. That's what we're doing. If you want to make melatonin, here's the ingredients. And your body will produce it itself. And what's really cool too is L-tryptophan actually converts into serotonin, which is the happy hormone. So that's why you're going to wake up feeling more refreshed, because that L-tryptophan has converted into serotonin as well. And I absolutely adore the Goodnight Sleep Sticks. I myself have responded very well to them. So I just bought a new box yesterday. So I'm very excited to be able to open that and take a swig of it tonight. But like I said, we don't just want to talk straight products. We'll keep going through some things, but I also want to give you a tip on different sounds. So some of you may sleep with white noise. That's equal intensity across all frequencies. That's kind of static on TV, a whirring fan, really good for light sleepers. Pink noise is a bit more balanced, kind of like rustling leaves or steady rainfall. That's more going to promote deep sleep. So if you're sitting there going, oh, I need to sleep a little bit longer through the night, you might want to actually put on a pink noise playlist. And then brown noise. Those are those rumbling thunder. They do benefit sleep, but they're really good for relaxation. So if you're finding yourself having a hard time winding down as you get up to bedtime, then you can put on some brown noise. So that thunder rumbling, those distant ocean sounds, you can probably just picture it. If you close your eyes, you can picture that in your head. The other cool thing is time with nature. So if you actually live in a greener neighborhood, you're more likely to sleep better. We know the trees suck up pollutants. We know that they make us feel calmer. We know that they actually release compounds called phytoncides, which are some of the essential oils. If you've ever walked through the woods after a rain, if you've ever gone up Knox Mountain after a rain, you know it just smells incredible. And that's one of the things is these trees are releasing those oils and those compounds that make us feel better. Now, we talked a little bit about melatonin. That's why L-tryptophan in the Goodnight product is so important. So when we think about stress and sleep, there are 6 products in the line. And the immediate question is, well, which one is right for me? And that's the hard part. We don't always know. And again, that's why we want to go into a nature fair and have a conversation with the staff and the team members, and they can kind of help us play detective a little bit. We talked a little bit about Goodnight so far, intentionally formulated really to support all the stages of sleep. It's this new herb in Canada, and it's chewable granules for easy delivery. So there's no more swallowing big pills before bed. And if you're like me, I don't want to have a big glass of water before bed either. So if I take pills, I'm going to have a big swig of water with it. The nice thing with the powder is I can put that in and typically it's gone, or I just take a little bit of water after it. And I talked earlier about the hieroglyphics, and you can see the wild lettuce actually show up there in the hieroglyphics again. There's multiple hieroglyphics I could have chosen, but this is actually just 4 that really kind of get the point across and make it stand out. Talked a little bit already about the L-tryptophan, just a good visual reminder that it does convert to the happy hormone, and it does convert to melatonin as well. Now, I just want to spend another quick second because I keep saying happy hormone, and we often think that serotonin is only for mood regulation. But we do know from the research that low levels of serotonin are linked to insomnia and a poorer rest. So have to kind of think about it. Serotonin is heavily implicated by light and darkness cycles. And so one of the big pieces there is that exposure to sunlight will boost serotonin production. We know, right? When we're spending time outdoors, when there's sunlight, we feel better. We tend to just go, oh, what a beautiful day. And then we know that serotonin also helps to stabilize mood, which is going to initiate the sleep process by calming the mind. If we are feeling happy, if we are feeling good about the situation at hand, we are less likely to drive ourselves into a tizzy right before bed and overthink the situation and cause insomnia. Now, what about relax spray? So I really like relax spray as what I call the Zen Seeker. So it's this 20 mil portable option. And it's for those who really need to calm their mind quickly. So I like it because it's actually an oral spray. So you take the top off, and with just 4 sprays, it's absorbed really, really quickly into the lining of the mouth and the nose. So if I experience turbulence, if I'm on a plane, if someone cuts me off in traffic and they don't look and they almost cause us to get into an accident, I'm going to feel a little perturbed, a little bit anxious about that driver. So then I might pull out my relax spray at 1, 2, 3, 4, quickly absorbs. The trouble is, if I take a capsule, the effect of that capsule isn't going to hit me until about an hour, hour and a half later, when it's gone into the stomach acid and absorbed into my bloodstream. So that's the nice thing with the oral spray, is it's a really fast acting anti-stress, anti-anxiety measure as well, which is passion flower and lemon balm. So I kind of want you to consider, would you prefer a quick, easy to use spray to help manage stress throughout the day without the need for pills or capsules? That's one of the things to consider. So stressful moments, flying, it is 12 plus. It's indicated for anyone who's 12 and older. So I love giving this to my teenage patients who are going into midterm season, who are going into exams, who have a big biology test. Maybe they're in the school play. Maybe they're in the school band. Maybe they're in the football team, and they've got a big game, a big performance coming up. Our teens can actually take this to reduce their stress. It's not going to take them from a 7 to a 0, but if we can take them from a 6 to a 4.5, well, now they can feel more in control of the situation, and they can engage with other coping mechanisms like deep breathing. And so one of the main ingredients in that relax spray is the passion flower. And passion flower is an incredibly well-studied herb for its anti-anxiety benefits. So for anyone who's dealing with kind of mild to moderate anxiety, stress, agitation, you can take the tincture and you can actually put it in your bottle of water. I've got my big 2.2 liter jug. You can maybe see it right there. So that's what I'm drinking throughout the day, but it's great because I can actually dilute a variety of tinctures in it and almost give myself my own kind of concoction depending on what support I'm looking for that day. So the passion flower is something I actually put in my water to just keep me at a better foundation for stress management. It helps boost the levels of what we call GABA, which is the neurotransmitter. It's kind of the calming, everything's okay neurotransmitter in the brain. And you can take it every single morning too, for that safe foundation for when you step out the door. Talked a little bit about this already. It is an anti-anxiety herb. That's its primary medicinal action. And it also is a muscle relaxant. So again, if you're holding a lot of tension in your muscles, that is going to by itself make you feel more stressed. So the passion flower will help to alleviate that mildly. Talked a little bit about GABA. I just said it's that brain chemical. So when GABA is high, we have a better time relaxing and getting to sleep. But when glutamate is high, that's the let's go, let's do this. This relationship is very similar to cortisol and melatonin. So you can see, going back to the circadian rhythm, that dance of all these brain chemicals, all these hormones, it is something that we really need to pay attention to. Sleep is foundational. Without a good night's sleep, we are not going to be able to function well the next day. If you're someone who really prefers kind of the single herb tinctures to help you get to sleep, then valerian, it does come in a tincture option too. So tinctures, what I really like is they get absorbed into the body really, really quickly, right? You can hold them in your mouth and they get absorbed even quicker. I will say tinctures aren't exactly the tastiest things to hold in the mouth, but it's like Buckley's. They might taste awful, but they work really well and really quickly. And the nice thing with valerian is you're going to get that nice refreshed sleep rather than that kind of sleep inertia grogginess that you might get with some of the heavier pharmaceutical options out there. But then in deep sleep, we actually take valerian and we combine it with hops. And what's really neat is they both have sedative properties, but they've actually been shown to work better together. So valerian is a bit more of a strong, potent sedative. Hops is a bit more of a gentle sedative. When you take the two of them and you combine them together, you're getting this really powerful compound. And This tincture's actually gone through a clinical sleep study. So we had a sleep study. We had all these people come in. They came into the lab. You hooked them up to the wires, which I'd never understand how anyone sleeps for a sleep study with all the wires hooked up to you. So they actually tested their brain the first night just to get a baseline of what their data is like. And then the next night they gave them deep sleep, and it actually improved deep sleep by 25%. So earlier, I know in the chat, someone had just mentioned, I don't spend a lot of time in deep sleep, only about 30 minutes. If we can actually improve how much time you're spending in deep sleep, again, that's better hormone regulation overall, neurotransmitters in the brain, all those brain chemicals, we're actually going to make them work better. So this double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled sleep EEG study in a parallel design using electrohypnograms, that's a big one. We know that the deep sleep is clinically shown to improve the actual deep sleep itself, right? How many times can I say deep sleep in one sentence? So this is what we're looking for. The chart won't move here, but you can see that on the second night, they spent a lot of time in deep sleep. That's that dark gray zone. But if we actually had seen the first night data, there was far less time spent in that deep sleep zone, far, far less time, 25% exactly. So it's a great option. And then the last one in that little conversation that we were having was Avena Force. So Avena Force is actually made from oat straw. This is actually quite common in skin topical preparations because it's very anti-inflammatory. It's very, very good for kind of mild scratches, mild burns, lacerations. You can use the oats. The tincture version is definitely a bit more of a nervine. So it's going to be the calmest, most gentle stress management option that we have. And it is also a tincture, so you get that really fast absorption. This is for people who regularly kind of sit between a 1 and a 3. They wouldn't say they're so stressed to the point where they can't function, but just every day there's that kind of feeling of underlying, I feel stressed. I don't know why, I just do. It's not anxiety, it's not super, super stressful, but it's just this baseline version of I'm a little bit more stressed than I want to be. So Avena Force can be a really good option for that overall. That's why I really like to tell patients, and I call it my gentle helper. So with that, I'm hoping that over the past 45 minutes, you've gotten some really, really good information that you can potentially use with your own friends, with your family, with yourself, and your loved ones. Sleep comes in all these different categories. We looked at all the factors earlier that do affect a proper sleep outcome as well. So whether it's nicotine, caffeine, heavy eating before bed, not having a sleep routine, don't punish yourself if you lose one good night of sleep. What we really want to make sure is we're stepping back, reevaluating, and making sure that our sleep routine is healthy with some strategic supplementation where required. So what we'll do is I'm going to end off on that slide, and we can head over to Q&A, I think.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Owen. That was very informational for all of us. I was jotting down the notes here as we were going. So one of the main questions that we received from our participants is, what do you do when you wake up at 2 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep? So you don't have trouble falling asleep, but you're waking up and then you can't get back to sleep after that.
Yeah, that's a very valid question there. So the big thing is with getting to sleep, that's fantastic. If you have a good, easy time, because we kind of saw that earlier, right, with the sleep cycles, those first couple of sleep cycles are going to be the really important ones overall. I'm not saying the others aren't important, but we know that we're going into less deep sleep as we get closer to waking. So if you can get to sleep and at least get yourself to 2 a.m., that's a start. You're halfway there. We just got to get you the rest of the way to the finish line. So the big thing I sit there thinking is, all right, I don't want a super potent sedative, because if I take a really strong sedative herb, then I'm going to wake up feeling groggy. It's going to pull me too far forward, and I'm going to wake up feeling really groggy. And if I have to be at the clinic or I have to be at work, I don't want to choose something with strong sedative. That would more be your deep sleep. That's going to be early in the night. So now I'm sitting there with the conversation in my head of, my alarm is set for 6 a.m. It's 2 a.m. right now. I still need a couple more hours of sleep. At that point, I'm probably going to do the sleep stick, the good night sleep stick, because that has compounds that will get me most of the way there without giving me that groggy feeling. If you're someone who is more waking up around 4 a.m. and your alarm is set for 6, at that point, you kind of pass the point where you need a sedative. Now what we're thinking is you probably need a Nervine. You need something to relax you without sedating you, because they are different things. So at that point, I would actually keep, I keep it right in my bedside table, but the relax spray, because the relax spray doesn't have sedative properties, it has relaxing properties. So I can actually draw my mind back down without sedating myself. So it's good to have a little bit of a toolkit at home so that you can make an informed choice on what's going to work for you depending on when you wake up.
Awesome. That's great. My next question from one of our guests, you were talking about the 11th meal and you don't want to eat too close to bedtime. So what would you say is too close to bedtime? Is that 30 minutes before, 2 hours before?
We typically want to move the food through the stomach, turn it into what we call chyme, which is it's a mixture of your food, stomach acid, pepsin, enzymes, etc. And you're going to move that through what we call the pyloric sphincter. It's right at the bottom of the stomach. You're going to move it through there into the small intestine. Usually once it gets into the small intestine, it's not going to disrupt our sleep nearly as much, but that does take some time. Depending on how quick your stomach is acting, it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour and 30 minutes, because it's very dependent on what type of food is in there as well. You know, the meat proteins in the steak are going to take a little bit longer to break down than if you had something like a protein shake, right? That's all liquid. So typically, I just say to be on the safe side, you're looking at least an hour and a half, 2 hours before bed. So if you're someone who's in bed and asleep by 10:30, you kind of want to cut off food by about 8:30. Even better if you could do it around 7:30. Give yourself 3 hours, but there is some leeway there.
Awesome. Sounds good. Does the time of day that you go to sleep have any effect on your sleeping? That might be for our night shift crew or our workers out there.
Yeah, so this hits close to home. I mean, my mother was a night shift nurse for 40 years, emergency pediatric night nurse. So I definitely have looked into the data a lot. I know that my mom is at a higher risk of a number of different things as a result. So the trouble is shift work is very tough on the body. Anyway, this is actually a good category where there's very few I will say I very rarely, if ever, recommend melatonin. The only time I do is really with shift workers and jet lag. Those are kind of the two categories I only recommend it in. So the big thing is you can use it for helping out with shift work. So the time of day that you're getting to sleep, it does matter. At the end of the day, your body will tend to be in a deeper sleep if it's sleeping between those dark hours. So the only thing I'd say here is you can mimic that darkness, making sure that your room is as dark as possible. Don't have the alarm clock with the bright light. I know when I go to a hotel, it's the first thing I do is I'll usually flip the alarm clock or cover it with one of my dirty shirts that I wore for the day. It's that bright light, it's going to wake me up immediately. The blackout curtains, there's not going to be a better investment, really. If we're looking at the quality of your sleep is where you need to invest in your life. So get the good blackout curtains, not the ones that still let a little bit of light sneak through. Make sure it's dark as anything. And at least then you're going to trick your brain and your body into thinking it's actual nighttime.
Amazing. Our next question is, you spoke about many of the Vogel products. Do any of them react with medications? Is there medications you would avoid if you're if you're taking them?
Yeah. So the main thing is you don't want to combine a bunch of sedatives. That's standard advice, whether it's a supplement, whether it's a medication, you name it, alcohol. So the main thing is you don't want to be sitting there going, I'm going to pop a trazodone and a zopiclone, and I'm going to have a glass of wine, and I'm going to take 2 different sleep medications. You are going to feel terrible the next day because your body is in mega sedation mode and depressant mode right now. So that's general guidance. If you're taking a whole bunch of different sedatives, not a great idea. So the main thing is you can kind of experiment. If your doctor has advised that you don't need to take your sleep medication every night and use it as needed, that's great because you can now experiment and you can try some of those natural health products on the nights where you're not taking the medication. If you have a healthcare provider that you're working with, a naturopathic physician that you're working with, you can get better guidance too. They'll be able to sit there and go, oh, you know what? Your dose of zopiclone is not that high. Your dose of lumberexin is not that high. We can actually pair these 2 together tonight. But I'm not your physician, so I just say
we had a couple people asking about antidepressants. Does it work with antidepressants, or should that be avoided?
So the big scare that we always hear about is serotonin syndrome. The likelihood of serotonin syndrome is far less than everything online you're reading would lead you to believe. It's typically really, really high doses of SSRIs or SNRIs. It's a class of medication that puts you at risk, or MAOIs, if you've ever been on one of those as well. So there is a chance, as always, but the dose of L-tryptophan in the Goodnight Sleep Sticks, which would be the main one I'd be having a conversation about, it's not high enough where you're actually going to have a significant risk there. So it's something that I would feel comfortable with my patients. If they were on various antidepressants, I would be comfortable having that conversation with them. The benefit there is that you're absorbing it into the lining of the mouth and the cheeks really quickly, and the tongue. It's not going down to the stomach acid and the liver and then the bloodstream for a little while. You're going to absorb most of it as you're holding it in your mouth. And you don't have to hold it in your mouth. I like a quick effect. I don't like waiting. If I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for hours to go to bed, I'm not going to like that. So just send me to sleep.
Awesome. That sounds great. I think we got through most of them. There was one question about melatonin. I know you just mentioned that you don't recommend melatonin. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that and maybe why it is or isn't good to use on a daily basis?
So melatonin has done very well for kind of being the first kid on the block. So the marketing engine behind melatonin has done really well. So there's a couple of reasons why I don't recommend it. The benefits, when you read into the research, are actually super modest. On average, it adds about 4 to 12 minutes to total sleep time. That's it. That's when you read really high quality, big research articles, 4 to 12 minutes. So, I mean, if you're sitting there going, I chronically don't sleep, then of course you're going to sit there and you're going to think, you know what, I'll take those 10 minutes for sure. But there are better options. So with melatonin, your body's producing it anyway. Work with what your body has. The other big thing is we see pediatric ingestions and melatonin poisoning on the rise, especially in the States. So it's something that I'm just trying to keep out of family houses overall, so that kids aren't mistakenly going in and taking melatonin. It is a hormone. We treat it as this really cutesy, benign thing, but it is a hormone and it does have impacts on the body. And the last thing I would say on melatonin and why I really don't recommend it, besides kind of the poison conversation, is with the research being so modest, especially with gummies, you have to kind of think, if we're adding it into gummies, it gets added as a powder into that gelatin mixture in a big industrial sized vat. I don't know if the gummy I'm getting contains 1 milligram or 15 milligrams. So it's really hard to standardize it in a gummy version. And they've studied that. So it's just something I go, the risks aren't worth it for me and my patient cohort. I'd rather just try other options.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. And we heard all about those options. I know you touched on it a little bit throughout your talk, but we have some guests asking, what would you recommend to increase the deep sleep? Lengthen that a little bit longer.
To lengthen it. Yeah. So on average, if you track your sleep in any way, like if you wear a smartwatch or if you wear one of the smart rings that are now becoming a big thing, you'll understand how much deep sleep you're in. So on average, you're typically looking at aiming for about anywhere from 20 to 24% deep sleep. So when you read your sleep charts and your sleep data the next day, if you can get between 20 to 24%, you're rocking it. You're doing a really great job. You're going to wake up feeling super well rested. So one of the big things now is, how do I get there? So depending on what's affecting your sleep, I sometimes have done a combination with patients with the deep sleep and the good night sleep sticks. Typically what I've done with the good night sticks is it comes with a box of 14. So I'll typically say, take one every single night for 7 nights, whether you think you need it or not. And then you're going to space them out one every other night for 2 more weeks. So that'll be 3 weeks, 14 sachets. And that should be enough to reset the rhythm. And you should notice a gradual trend of improving your deep sleep. It's not going to be like magic and in one night everything's going to be fixed. It's really trying to reset that rhythm. We saw how complicated on that circadian rhythm and that sleep cycle slide, how complicated sleep actually is and how many factors affect it. So one good night isn't going to be the be all end all. We want to make sure that we're getting that consistently.
Okay. Awesome. I think that's pretty much our time for this evening. Thank you so much for answering all those questions.
Pleasure.
Of course, if you guys have any additional questions, you can reach out to any of the Nature's Fair team. They're all very knowledgeable about the Vogel products. So please visit the store if you have any questions. And we do have a number of products on sale till November 13th in store as well. And if you'd like to rewatch the webinar, I'll be sending everyone the link tomorrow by email. So watch for that. You can share it. And there's also some of our other webinars on there if you're interested in watching. But I just wanted to say thank you very much to Dr. Owen for joining us this evening. And I hope you guys all learned a ton. And we look forward to seeing you again.
And get a good night's sleep tonight.
Yes.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.